Oh, good morning, everyone. Tara, what do you call an angry carrot?
Couldn't begin to say a German.
No, a steamed veggie.
Oh,
Uh,
that's so cute. That is a quintessential dad joke right there. You must have young children.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on Wednesday. I almost said Wednesday. Today's Tuesday. Tara and I are
Right.
meeting on Tuesdays with relationships and communication. And we are passionate about this topic because we know that better communication creates better families, better relationships, better businesses, and better communities. And one of the parts of communication that we're talking about this week is a follow-on from last week. It's a part two of how do your words land on the various generations. And we had a fascinating conversation last week going through Generation Alpha and Gen Z, and we were sort of starting to get into millennials and Gen X and all of those. And so I think I got this right. Did I get this backwards? I'm always confused. I got them right. And so anyway, we wanted to continue it to talk more and even talking about baby boomers, et cetera, because I think there is something to the fact of how do we communicate. And last week we talked about how Generation Alpha specifically are so fast. Their brains work really fast, and how they are very socially anxious. They're the most socially anxious generation out there. And anyway, it opened up a whole wide conversation. So we're going to dive in today. So Terry, I know you've got some more research that you wanted to share, and yeah, so kick us off with let's keep going and see how we get on.
Yeah, I think I want to backtrack just a minute and remind our family why we chose this topic. And part of it came from the workshops that I conduct. People constantly want to know how to better communicate with various generations. And it's usually coming from like Gen X baby boomers wanting to know how to communicate with millennials and Gen Z. That's where the rub is. It's not the other way around. Like I don't hear young people saying, "How do I communicate with baby boomers?" It's just not in their brain.
Mhm.
But as you turn it around, and I think it's because um, our supervisors, bosses, managers, whatever you might want to call them, they're managing people that have been raised very differently than they have.
Mhm.
And what I see in maybe a less open-minded person or less aware is super critical of it.
Mhm.
But you know what? Research tells us that we've been criticizing younger generations forever. And our baby boomers today were criticized by their grandparents in this very same way, and ironically, for the very same reasons. So I think here's what's odd is starting with the millennial generation, um, they they're kind of the Oprah. They were raised by parents who watched Oprah, and Oprah was like the pioneer of taking conversations away from facts and put into feelings. So
Mhm.
there really has been a shift in our culture. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm. Yeah, I do.
So there's been that shift, but we still see as generations go by that the older generations look at the younger generations as lazy or not motivated. And
Mhm.
now we throw in this huge other component, which is a multi-billion dollar industry, which is tapping into people's emotions and offering them some respect. So what I think we're seeing, Kathryn, is our more seasoned generations oftentimes are not comfortable with that, and we tend to criticize what we're not comfortable with. So,
Okay. Oh, yeah, there's several places that reminds me of. It's like in the sports world where it's everybody gets a trophy,
yes.
and that wasn't of the baby boomer generation. I mean, you learned hard losses, like
Mhm.
that was that. And I think what you're saying is important that like every generation or at certain points, the older generation is critical of the younger generation. And I hear that a lot, like this young generation coming up these days is never gonna, with the social media and it's like and the drugs and all of that. And yes, and it was like that in a very different way for every generation coming up. We've evolved. We are constantly evolving. And so we're all having to learn new ways of doing that. Our brains are evolving. So what are the pitfalls of that and what are the benefits? And that's a little bit about what we talked about last week.
Yeah. What to me is really ironic about today's culture and these different generations is the younger the generation, the more that they are exposed to being aware of feelings and emotions and validating them and respecting them. But they're the least able to communicate in social settings, which is exactly what they need.
Mhm.
And so it's just a crazy divide. And I want to shine a light on this before we dive into the other generations, because it is up to us. So I'm Generation X and baby boomers to help the millennials and the Gen Z and the Generation Alpha along. And remember how anxious they are in social settings. Not all of them, but a great margin of them.
Mhm.
And we can help them in that.
Yeah, and how to identify anxiety and that's okay. Because the other piece, so there's a lot to that. Like it's one thing with the emotions, I think it has to be a balance. And I do find sometimes that I wonder if people are living too much in their emotions and for their emotions and being driven by their emotions versus, we're saying maybe baby boomers don't identify or historically haven't identified so much, but there has to be a balance. Wow, that's my emotion. I'm not going to be driven by it. Because
Mhm.
I feel bad doesn't mean I don't have to go to work today, unless it's a physical thing and I really don't, just because I don't want to. And so yeah, it is curious to see how does one individual have a balance of those things to have a whole, like a holistic experience, a holistic life, to live the best of their ability.
Right. Absolutely. Like, it's a very common thing to hear the term mental health day.
Yeah.
And I mean, so
Not you're in the 50s.
the older generations laugh at that, but and I'll put myself in older generations to a point, we've caused the need for the mental health days. You've heard me tell this before, but I think it's a great way to kick off how we see millennials. And I have to share the story about Holly, my youngest daughter, who is a millennial. She's a young millennial. When she moved home during the pandemic and started interviewing for a new job, and she found her dream job. It was a marketing role with Amazon. And the interviewing was really rigorous. And there was a lot of preparation, and she worked so hard, and she lands this job with Amazon. She couldn't believe it. We're all celebrating. Monday morning comes. So she's still, living in our house. She hadn't quite moved out yet. She goes upstairs and she does her job all day on the computer. Not a lot is said. Tuesday comes around. She goes upstairs, does her job all day on the computer. Wednesday comes around. She goes upstairs. Right about 5 o'clock, she comes downstairs. She sits at the counter and her lip starts to quiver and she starts to cry. And I'm like, what's wrong? And she said, I don't think I can do it. I think I've oversold myself. I don't think I can do this job. And I said, well, Holly, honey, you're going to probably have to work some nights and weekends to, get past this learning curve. She said, I will not sacrifice my mental health for Jeff Bezos.
For her.
Oh, and we still laugh about that because I just thought that doesn't sound like someone that I would have raised, because I was raised in the hustle culture, right?
Mhm.
Harder, work hard, grit, whatever it takes to win is what I'm going to do. And she was raised in what I call this kind of, my parents watched Oprah world. And she still works for Amazon, but she has certainly a hold on the mental health. So I'll share a little bit of the research I found around millennials.
Okay.
Millennials are about born 1980 to 2000, right? And that there's different, like one report will tweak those years by a year or two, but somewhere born between the 80s and the year 2000 is about the millennials. Here's some interesting facts about them, though. They get along with their parents better than past generations. I can't figure out why that is, but I guess what I'm guessing is a couple things. They're much more in touch with their emotions, but they also are the ones that are starting to be so socially anxious. So that it's safer at home, right?
Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, they're just
It's
not as
not-
social naturally. They socialize through texting and Instagram. So
Right, right.
uh, they also have put a lot of value on fun and experiences and work-life balance, time away. They value self-expression. Here's some fun facts about millennials. 40% of them have tattoos.
Interesting.
Yeah. 75% of them, which I thought it would be higher, 75% of them are on social media. I would have thought even higher than that. But the 40% tattoos is kind of funny to me. I
Interesting.
told my kids they couldn't get a tattoo while they were living under my roof. And if they did, they could still live there, but I wouldn't feed them. 2 out of 3 of them heeded that advice. And on Holly's 18th birthday, she got a tattoo. So,
My gosh.
um, I just thought that was a little bit young. I'm certainly have nothing against tattoos, but I didn't want her to do it at 16. So, all right. So here's how do we communicate with millennials? What would be your guess about how we can best communicate with millennials?
I said it last week because it was on that show we watched, The Beef. I'll say it again. Don't be old. Text
Yeah.
me. And that's how, I have two sisters who are millennials, and that is a lot of it is texting, quick to the point, bottom line. But we have long conversations by text to the point where I'm like, in fact, last night it happened. I was texting with one of my sisters, and I was like, I'm ready to go to bed. But it's just these little, and then another question, it's a whole conversation. I'm not used to that.
Oh, I can't stand it.
Yeah. I'm like, why don't we get on the phone? That's how you talk on the phone. So that's number one. That's one thing. That's one area is like be up on, technology. But I think we probably want to focus more on in-person communication. How do you speak to them? I'm curious what you think. In my experience is mostly with them. And it's a lot of logistics. It's a lot of being interested in their life and what's going on. Is that it? Okay,
Yeah,
interesting.
that's a big part of what I've learned is we really need to listen to them. And we have to have the patience to let them think and process, ask good questions. They need buy-in before they're going to support what our ideas are. So we can't force upon them. They don't like to be controlled.
Mhm.
They,
Mhm.
in kind of in sales language, like we need to lead them to our conclusion so that they think it's their own idea,
Okay.
which sounds
Okay.
kind of manipulative, and I don't mean it to be that way. But you know what, Kathryn, it makes me think of is what you're a master at, and that's it's asking these great questions as a coach.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, it is interesting because we can be in conversations, and if I'm not careful and I don't really ask a lot of questions, we'll never get there. They don't offer a lot. They don't come in wanting to like offer a whole bunch of information or talk about themselves a lot. Uh,
Mhm.
and it could just be them. But yeah, if I ask questions, then I get a lot of information, suddenly, and then it's like peeling back the onion. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that there was that much or that was going on. And so I could see that. I can definitely see the don't like to be controlled part.
Mhm.
Want
Yeah.
autonomy, we're saying,
Respect.
mhm. And is this the generation that will leave a job just like that? Like just because they don't like it, like that they kind of move around? Is that
It,
gig culture kind of
I have definitely read that about millennials and Generation Z that they're not looking at a job as I'm going to stay here for 25 years and get some kind of
right,
fancy retirement trophy. Absolutely. They look at it as experience.
right. And
Move
the
on.
freedom, they want the freedom. So if it starts to, it's kind of like Holly said, if it starts to encroach on that, it's
Mhm.
not worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh you know this, but we got a little townhouse for Caroline and we just met one of her neighbors in this cute little neighborhood. And out walks this lovely gal, just as cute as she could be, definitely in the millennial era. And started talking to her for just a few minutes. And she said, I'm here all day. And I said, doing what? And she said, working. I work from home. And I was like, duh, which so do you. But I mean, so many people do that. But millennials expect to be able to do that so much more than my generation and older. They expect to have the freedom to work at home.
Hmm.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway for me in talking to this generation is what you said is honor their freedom, their autonomy, their self-authority, and connect in that level.
Mhm.
Um, and then the listening part, like to be really curious, because I do think, and what's fascinating to me right now is as we've talked through these, how a generation can be shaped by their society, which, duh, of course. But we often talk about family units and how we're shaped by our experiences, if we've had trauma growing up, et cetera. But it's so interesting how what's happening in society has such an impact on, the whole
Absolutely.
how they're
There's
raised.
there's one other piece I think we would be remiss in not paying attention to, and this is a little bit in the Dr. Gupta world, but millennials have been comparing themselves to others, especially physically, for almost as long as they can remember. And that's part of the challenge with the social anxiety and the insecurities is they look at influencers with the perfect body, the perfect car, the perfect clothes, the seemingly perfect life, and they berate themselves for not being up to those standards. And that to me is a really sad part of the digital age.
Mhm. Yeah, I could see that because also it's what's presented.
Mhm.
You're not putting the outtake picture of the perfect family photo when everybody's like looking every other direction with their tongues hanging out. You're putting the most perfect, pristine picture. And I think our brains make things up about that. Um, yeah, and this is more generation alpha, I think. But the other thing that happens also with this is they can, and this didn't happen in mine, and certainly not in your era, like they can see where people are. So they can see if they're being excluded. Their locations on their
Oh,
phone.
it's so true.
And that's what's happening a lot with the young people is they'll say, oh my gosh, everybody's ever here. You don't hear about it Monday morning. It's like you're watching it live. And why was I not invited? And it's that part to me, it's just, I know it must be the anxiety of that, just trying to fit in and say all the things that come with it. And then the optics,
Yeah.
I think that would be a lot.
Yeah. You know what I equate it to is I think about when I was growing up and we had fashion magazines
Mhm.
and but my head wasn't in them all day, every day, reminding me of my imperfections, you
Well, and
know?
also they would be on the red carpet or, it would be something that you couldn't relate to. Like, that's not my life. Now it's like, it's their whole life. It's live. It's up to date. I
Yours
can
too.
say, oh, well, that doesn't look like my house, because it's so relatable in that way. And then we
Yeah.
compare and people have gotten so good at the videography of it and how to paste it all together so that it does look like this beautiful whatever, even the TikTok videos, and it's just, yeah, it's a whole different realm.
I know it. I know. So, all right. So, communicating with millennials, we'll wrap them up and let's move into my Generation X. What
Okay.
would you be? Generation X too, or no?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. All right. You're just a younger version, which makes sense. Yeah. Okay. So, to communicate best with millennials, just remember to be patient, listen first. They want buy in. Don't assume that they are spoiled and disrespectful. Those are stereotypes, and we cannot assume that. I think Rashida wanted to chime in before we move on. Go ahead, darling.
Yeah.
Good morning,
Good
my
morning.
day. I'm telling you, my daily order. I am I am thrilled with the topic, really thrilled with the topic because I have 4 kids, 3 girls. I have 4 kids between 46 and 26 tomorrow. My youngest going to be, and I have 10 grandkids. And I'm telling you, this topic is like out of this world because I don't even know what to do with my grandkids. Okay, as a matter of fact, I don't even know what to do with my girls and my kids.
Mm-hmm.
Much less my 10 grandkids. But I like the topic. Why? Because my 25-year-old is in the Air Force. And 2 years ago, no, as a matter of fact, 18 months ago, he came to me and he said, Mom, I don't know what to do. I said, you sure? You really want me to tell you what to do? He said, I asked the wrong person.
You had to get an I told you so in there, didn't you?
And I said, you sure you don't have nothing to do? Anyway, I said, okay, what you want to do? He said, I don't want to work for anybody. I said, why? He said, I don't see you working for anybody. Why should I go and work for anybody? I was like, wait a minute. So eventually I sit down with him and he opened his own corporation. Mind you, I still on his corporation. He says, why did that you have to be on my corporation? I say, wait a minute, you have 3 boys and my share go to my grandkid. He said, damn, mommy, you really have this perspective of protecting. I say, no, legacy. So in my family, and I say it's 200 years of legacy as following through, and we are entrepreneurs family. So when you're talking about millennium and being independent and be working from home, mind you, I come from one of those settings, but I love the topic because in what I am going to pass on to my grandkids is my question. Because in my Nana's girl, they will come and say, okay, Nana, we want to know how to get dressed and how to get this because I'm a fashion designer. But the millennial concept of dressing is not the same concept of this Nana girl. So the millennium really have take a whole toll or a different perspective of where we come from.
Right.
So mind you, what we can pass on to them is just what they're going to take from us. And with that, I'm out, but I'm still here. Trust me.
Yeah, thank you, Rashida. That's a really good point. Yeah, it is a really good point to balance out what we're saying, Tara. I think if I'm hearing you right, Rashida, it's like, yes, let's figure out how to communicate with them and meet them at their level. And let's not forget what we need to communicate and what we need to pass on.
Yes, absolutely. That's a great segue into our Generation X, actually, because it really helps to understand, where we're coming from a little bit and why. And I don't mean to say we, because there's all different ages on our daily huddle family. I'm talking to you. So Generation X, born right around 1961 to 1981. So that's about the time frame. And this is, I think, really interesting. Generation X is often called the sandwich generation because they have found themselves with parents living longer and kids staying home longer, and they're offering financial support to the parents and the children at the same time. And it is affecting their potential for a comfortable retirement. Yep. So I think that's pretty fascinating. Generation X tends to put a lot of pressure on themselves. They were the first generation to really see, I think, well, maybe it was just more exposed, but a lot more divorce in our generation, a lot more working parents, latchkey kids, which caused the sense of, I have to take care of my siblings, I have to be responsible, and we have just taken that pressure into the world. So Generation X folks value shared responsibility. And one of the best ways to communicate with Generation X is to offer to take pressure off, offer to help them. The key for Generation X, and I can so relate to this, and I'm getting better at it for sure, is getting them to accept the help.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. That hit home for sure. And and I don't know if this lives anywhere in the generation itself, but like I see it sometimes too. That's sort of the martyr stance. Like I need help, but not going to accept it.
Yes.
I'm going to ask for it, and that's been a real learning for me. And I am Generation X. So like how to ask for and really, truly accept the help. That is fascinating because I see that everywhere.
Well, a lot of Generation X, they will, in the, I guess, less evolved, less self-aware, less confident Generation X will have a tendency to be super passive aggressive and kind of, in a way, stomp around the office or stomp around the house because there's so much work on them, but yet they're not letting anybody help.
Yeah.
Right? I'll just do it myself. So we have to be careful.
It's taking it all on. That's the other. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we have to be careful of what?
We have to be careful not to be that, like to realize that we don't have to do it all ourselves, and that accepting help, we need to remind ourselves that we like to offer help. Therefore, we need to learn to accept it.
So I know we said that the younger generations are not really interested in learning how to communicate with the older ones, but I'm seeing this as a potential place for real conflict for, the younger generation, especially like millennials, because self-care is huge in their world.
True.
And they're watching their parents, et cetera, or people like take it all on. No, I don't need any help. And they're like, okay.
Yeah.
Like, don't know why you do that, but okay. So that's an interesting place. I've seen that a lot. Yeah. Fascinating. Really fascinating.
I don't want to make this move into a third week. So I'm going to finish us off with what I've studied and researched about baby boomers. And they were born right around 1947 to 1963, somewhere around that time frame. So for me, this certainly would have been my parents. Here's what's interesting about baby boomers today is they still have a lot of power. And to really shine a light on this, I think it's interesting to note that in our Senate, the average age person in our Senate is 64 years old. Yeah.
Mhm.
So over half of the entire Congress, Senate and Congress are baby boomers.
Mhm.
So people are living longer, they're active longer physically and professionally. So they're still extremely, extremely active and involved. And what drives them a lot of times is their fear that they're losing relevancy and that their traditions are not respected. A lot of them may just really lament, and I think I brought this up last week, they may lament the digital age. Like you'll say to someone who's a baby boomer, I've got the address in my phone, I don't need the directions, but they're
Right.
determined to tell it to you, and they want to say something like, oh, that thing might fail. You need to know. And I think that in some ways, the digital age has taken a little bit of their value away.
Mhm.
Because people are able to get from a smartphone what they used to get from their
Mhm.
parent or someone from that generation.
Mhm.
So to communicate with a baby boomer, respect is absolutely key. Respect for their life experiences and their wisdom. And
Mm.
I think that is a beautiful lesson to stop and remember that as we age, our life experiences are not irrelevant. They're gold.
Mhm. Mhm. I think that's so true. It I think it's so true. It's so fascinating because it's again communicating across the generations, across the ages, and what can we learn from that, and how can we make for better communication so we can have better relationships. But I think what I'm taking away from this is yeah, I can see that. Like I'm thinking of my mom and her partner, my dad, and different things like that, like in that generation of, oh yeah, I can see where that would be really valuable to them. They have something to offer. They're not, because I think also in the United States specifically, our culture is sort of, as you get older, you are less relevant. We toss you aside, we put you in a home. It's not like some of the Asian cultures where that actually they're valued, the, elders are valued. So yeah, I could see a lot of that.
I'll tell you where I really stopped to take this to heart, and it was long before I did this research. My mom's gone now, and she was definitely a baby boomer. And as she got older, it made it more difficult for her to communicate and understand maybe what I was talking about, and I had to slow down, and I didn't really have the patience for it. And at the same time, my daughter Caroline's mind was slowly being attacked by seizures, and she was becoming slower and slower. And it became more and more difficult to communicate with Caroline. And I'll never forget this. I was on the phone with my mom, and she could tell that I was frustrated. And she asked me, she said, does talking to me feel like you're talking to Caroline?
Oh.
I know. And I thought, I told her no, of course. But the truth is, I had thought that so many times. But in that moment, it helped me to remember that if we just slow down and wait and listen, I mean, some of the most wise comments have come out of the mouth of Caroline and, of course, the elderly.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to wait and sometimes allow them to pull it out because you can't get wisdom from a university or from TikTok.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, you can get information, but wisdom, I'm not sure. Well, we said that. It's interesting because we said that last week about the younger generations to slow down and allow them to process with their social anxiety. So that seems to be a common theme across the different generations is slow down, allow for that conversation to unfold and happen, and whoever it is to process at whatever speed that they want to process at. I mean, I think that could be a takeaway for anyone.
Wow. Yeah, I think that is an overarching for different reasons. If we can just slow down and listen,
Mm-hmm.
give people space. It's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, the last thing I would like to say is happy birthday, Kathryn.
Thank you.
Today is the
Thank
big day.
you. And thank you,
Happy
Tom.
birthday to my treasured friend.
Thank you so
Um,
much.
Thank you for having this conversation with me. Thank you all, Daily Huddle family. I hope it's been enlightening a little bit about the different generations. There's a world of research out there. But as you kind of put a crown on this or an umbrella on it, Kathryn, or I guess a candle. It really helps me to lead into our first tenet. And really what we do when we slow down and listen to people is we love.
Mm-hmm.
We just remember to love. And to me, today, I think that goes along with respect. So let's remember to love and to give. Slow down, give of our time, of our heart, of our talents. And always, always don't take things too seriously. Let's remember to laugh, throw that head back, and enjoy those endorphins, which helps us to take care of our body. And to do that, we need to stress less. We need to get more sleep. We need to eat more plants. And remember to get up and move that body. See y'all next time on the Daily Huddle. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you. No better place
right,
to spend a
thank you.
birthday. Thank you, guys.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday. Happy birthday.
Daily Huddle family,
Hey guys,
I'm Zach,
I'm Kimberly.
and we're your hosts for Money Monday on the podcast. And we have been with the Daily Huddle now for a little over a year, and it has been transformative. It's been fantastic for us, and I hope it's been fantastic for you guys.
We are super excited to see you on our 1,000th episode. I can't believe it's been 1,000 episodes, but
See you guys there.
Thank you, everybody, for helping us get to our 1,000th episode on the Daily Huddle. We are so excited. This is Kathryn and Tara from Relationships and Communications on Tuesday.
When we started this journey together, built a community of strength and authenticity around us. We showed up to give, but we've received more than we ever could have imagined.
Way more.
And it's all thanks to you.
Here we are approaching the 1,000th episode of the Daily Huddle. I've laughed, I've cried in private and in public. Daily Huddle has been something that has really soothed me from the inside. It's been an amazing experience. Happy 1,000th, that it's right on the way. This is something that is a necessary vibe. I love you all. Thank you so much.
I'm so excited that we are celebrating 1,000th episode. I'm your host for Thursday Spiritual Matters, Dr. Monica Ogando. This is really an ensemble cast. It is really a joint, a village, a community effort, a community celebration. And so I want to thank you personally for being part of the Daily Huddle family. And here's to 1,000 more.
3 years, 1,000 episodes. I want you to know that none of it is possible without the pristine listening that you provide. We are celebrating you, and I cannot wait for 1,000 more episodes of us being together as family, making a difference for the world.
I can't believe it's 1,000 episodes. A big thank you for being part of my life. You gave me a new context for life, and I have to tell you, my life is richer because you have been part of it. I love you, and I'll see you later.